Hello, everyone, and welcome to Moementum Mondays. On these weekly series, every Monday, we invite one inspiring young man or woman to our show and talk to them about important topics, including investing, financial planning, and financial education. Many of our guests include fellow YouTubers and investors who I've followed on YouTube and enjoyed their contents. Without any further ado, let's get into it. My name is Mo, and I'm super excited to have a lovely couple for our Valentine's Day edition. We have with us Kevin and Clarice. Welcome, guys.
Hi.
Wonderful.
Hey, Mustafa.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, welcome to the show. I'm super excited to have both of them. I know Kevin and Clarice from the past, from scouting years, and I've actually learned a little bit about their fire journey, which is, I think, super relevant to our viewers here on Momentum channel. So I wanted to invite them to the show and kind of grill them on some interesting questions that are relevant to our community.
That's not what you said.
Well,
You didn't say you were going to grill us. Okay, we're happy to share.
Yeah, let's get into it then. So the first question that I have for you guys is, what inspired you to start your FIRE journey, your financial independence, retire early journey, and when did you begin?
Well, I think for us, even before FIRE, we were probably like very typical people. Growing up, what resources did you have to learn about finance, personal finance? It's usually probably apart from what came from your family, your upbringing, maybe a little bit from school, and then what you would trust in terms of someone from a bank telling you on how you should be managing your finances and preparing for your future. And I think it was with that, like that, at least we followed the general advice in terms of trying to save money and having a savings account, and eventually opening up an RRSP and a TFSA. So we did all that, but I think for us, in terms of FIRE, it really was a chance introduction to some of the subject matter. We got exposed to it from a mutual friend, and we found a book that was recommended to us, and we got the audiobook version of that, and we plugged it in to the car, and we incidentally were going on a big road trip, a multi-day road trip, and Clarice and I had the chance to listen to this book, and which covered the basics of what FIRE was. And every day, we would stop and we listen and drive, and we talk about some of the concepts. And the more and more we thought about it, the more and more the concept resonated with us. And it kind of opened our eyes and our curiosity about what was possible for us. I think we had always considered retirement as a very distant concept that maybe you start thinking about when you're in your 50s or 60s, and certainly you wouldn't consider the possibility of retirement much earlier in life. So I think for that was a bit world perspective changing for us, and I mean, even now I think we're still, our worldview is still changing and evolving as we try some of the concepts from FIRE and from other places and test them out in our own lives and how they feel, and how we are responding to them.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think we're still babies in terms of the FIRE journey, but it's been almost a year now. So we embarked on kind of having a FIRE mindset. And I think prior to that, life was very much go to work, come home from work, or grab a beer with coworkers, and if we wanted to buy something for our personal enjoyment or go on a vacation, to be like, great, seems like we have enough money coming in so that we can afford to go on these things. And at the end of the year, we put as much money as we can, into our RSP, TFSA, and then if we had money left over, it would be, well, let's put it into paying off our mortgage. And like that was before we were familiar with alternatives to what to do with your income and savings. So it's totally opened our eyes to alternative method of approaching life and retirement. So it's been very refreshing.
You mentioned a book and the audiobook that you listened to. Do you mind sharing with our viewers what that book was? And did you also review other materials along the way to get more and more educated on this topic?
Yeah, I mean we certainly, I think we're comfortable enough with the book that we're willing to share with others. It's the book's name was Quit Like a Millionaire. And it was about actually, incidentally, a Canadian couple's journey in discovering fire. And they do a really good job of breaking down into step-by-step fashion the mindsets and the types of things that you would be doing, and even explaining some of the financial portions of it, which I would say often, as we said, there's not a lot. There used to not be a lot of resources that would explain that to you, not without having to pay for that in a traditional financial advisor sense.
Mhm.
So it was, yeah. So we found that book particularly inspiring.
Mhm.
Um, Prior to Fire, I was always just even a big fan of a website called Tax Tips. I thought they just gave um, very, I would say, conservative but plain, simple advice on how to manage your finances and other topics like that. And Canadian Couch Potato was also, I was always a big fan of that prior to Fire as well.
In pursuit of your fire journey or your journey towards financial independence, financial abundance, what were some of the first steps that you took? So let's say you got inspired with that mindset, took on that mindset, but what were some of the first initial steps that you took to take it into, from the mindset into actually taking actions?
I think one of the first things we did was, well, we firstly we agreed that this was something we wanted to try and do, and then very quickly from there we had to figure out that very question: well, what do we do first, right? And I think the first thing we needed to do for our own just comfort level was to get a understanding of where our finances were at. Um, I think we we had to consolidate our finances, um, the number of bank accounts we had open in different branches because of various promotions over the years
Mhm.
that we opened up, and even the number of credit cards that we had for very similar reasons because of fringe benefits that each card would offer. It just, I think, was at the point where there was so much of that and it was so fragmented that it was hard to manage or even wrap your head around. So we went through an exercise over the course of several months of just closing down unnecessary bank accounts, consolidating our money, the number of accounts, consolidating our credit cards, so that we could even look at it and understand what we were doing. And we even geeked out a bit. We uh, we even downloaded the transactions from the websites, and we would put it into our own spreadsheet so that we could understand like where's all our money going. Um, and we've done that like at different levels in the past in our life, but I think this time with the lens of Fire, it kind of changed the context of how we looked at our expenses and what was necessary and what we could do without. Um, I joked with Clarice that it was a bit like a financial Mary Kondoing, like just, do these things spark joy in our life, spending our money
Mhm.
on it? And are we really getting something from it? Especially in the context of everyone's lives being reevaluated with the pandemic and, what is really valuable and what is not. So I think that was one of our first steps. I think that in itself triggered a lot of great discussions on where are we spending our money, and are these our priorities in life, or how come we're not spending more on our priorities in life.
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
and a world of discovery, I think, just happened by just doing that, looking at your money, consolidating it, and having real talk with each other about what it meant.
Mhm. And so Kevin mentioned that we examine our expenses, and it was initially, a fun exercise to start setting a budget and realize how much money we're going to put into a car or into food, into education, into the home, into upgrading our home. And now it's become like the thing we look forward to the most at the end of every month. Um, we pull all the data together and then we analyze it by category, and then if we're above budget, we actually look at, hey, why did we go over budget and what are we going to do next month to fix that. So we call it our monthly financial roll up, almost like a business monthly financial review. It's so fun, isn't it?
Well, I rationalize it like, hey, we probably, in many people's professional lives, you spend a lot of time looking at, your monthly or your period end finances, and
Mhm.
you spend a lot of work to understand that and to improve it for next month. It's funny that we spend so much time doing that for someone else, but why we don't apply that in arguably the most important aspect, which is your own lives, right? So we kind of turned that around and said, well, why don't we use some of what we know from our professional
Mhm.
lives and use it on ourselves, basically.
It is so
Yeah.
powerful. It reminds me of one of the inspiring speakers and public speakers who talked about you are the CEO of your own business, the business of your own life. So it
Mhm.
really reminds you of how it is so important for us to take control of our lives. And the budgeting piece that you talked about, spending the time to really going through those itemized transactions, reflecting on those, really boils down to identifying what are some of your priorities items. Are you spending money on the things that matters to you most, or are you just spending because maybe you've got so used to it and we never start even questioning those the
Yeah.
cost items? So it's so
Yeah.
powerful. Budgeting is absolutely critical. Have there been some lessons along the way? Clarice, you mentioned that you've been on this journey for a year or so right now. What have been some of those lessons that you've learned along the way?
I think for us, first and foremost, is like fire is a great body of knowledge, and it is that though it is not a prescription for how you must and should get to retirement, or what you define as retirement. There are many different flavors of it. There's something called fat fire, which is like not only being financially independent, but being able to spend very freely, even in financial independence. There's side fire, which is a form where you can continue working, but hey, you have this comfort knowing that you are financially independent and you have more freedom to pick and choose what you do, more from a passion perspective rather than just trying to maximize your income. And I think for us that was important in understanding that as a learning point is that hey, like you've got to make this work for you, your personal circumstances, um, that affect how you might envision your retirement. That could be dependents, it could be children or even parents, um, and where you want to spend your retirement. I think all those have to come into play um, as factors. I think for us too, we see fire as like one piece of the puzzle, and we draw from other bodies of knowledge as well to kind of shape what is our kind of formula or secret sauce for how we're going to get to the finish line for us.
Mhm. The fire journey has made it within reach to live the life that we hope to live, fulfilled. So previously, at least for me, it felt like the reason I wake up every day is, just to go to work, do a good job at work, get your paycheck, and then you're, paying your expenses. That was kind of like, and to what end, right? At a certain point, you start asking, what is the meaning of all this? And ultimately, what do we want to do and how do we want to influence the community and society at large with the rest of our lives? And I think encountering the concept of fire kind of ignited our creativity on how we could go about getting to that point where we're no longer just tied to our old way of living because of financial reasons. So I think in my mind, when we achieve fire, we can truly start doing the things that tugs at our heartstrings and really inspire us and perhaps inspire others without worrying, like, am I making enough money? Like, am I going to run out of money in 5 years? And that is hugely powerful. Like, it's living for a different reason, I think. And fire makes it possible to dream that dream.
It does absolutely give you that freedom. Clarice, you talked about that element of creativity and how this fire journey sparked your creativity. Now, I know Kevin and Clarice for several years now, and I know Kevin with his engineering background and Clarice with your creativity that I've observed from you, your management and business background as well. How have you applied that into making this journey, unique to yourself? And Kevin, you touched on that a little bit earlier. That even when it comes to fire, it's not the end of the journey and it's not the end all be all. You have to kind of adapt and personalize to what suits best your needs. How have you relied on some of your strengths in making that happen?
I actually, for me, I think we really enjoyed uh, the the pursuit of, from a fire perspective, what could we eliminate from our lives that is unnecessary? And I think when you start that, you get to a certain point and be like, okay, well, let's stop going out for beers so often, or let's order less takeout. Let's cook more at home. And you go through these, I would say, successive waves of reduction, and every time you reach a certain plateau, it's like the clouds in the mountains e- evaporate, and you see another plateau, and then you can kind of go. You see a path to getting to the next step, and I think that's been great to just maybe, in a sense, using our the rational mind and just power of observation and focusing on it. We've been able to continuously do that and really cut back on a lot of unnecessary things in our lives. And I think that's been cool. And using some of my my education and thought processes and applying that to ourselves in a very personal sense, that's been cool.
And maybe to give you a specific example, so when lockdown started to happen, and we were itching to travel, but we couldn't. Kevin thought of, well, why don't we do what we call World Adventure Night once a week? And so we would select one country that we have not been to and we don't know a lot about, and we spend the week kind of researching things about the government, about the primary religions and the languages, and then also every Saturday we would be cooking a meal featuring that country, and so it kind of forced us to explore different cuisines that we otherwise wouldn't have if we had just decided to, well, let's go out and have dinner. And a side effect of that was that, well, suddenly we learned the cooking techniques of, I don't know, like 15 different countries that we had been to and explored through our World Adventure Night. And, even though we don't do that much anymore, like every day, I'm cooking 3 meals a day, and I can now use those skills so that, we don't get bored eating spaghetti every day.
Mhm.
And it's been a great exercise in creativity for sure, and building that fun into life. Yeah.
I love it. Has there been challenges along the way, or things that perhaps people who hear about fire? Because I know a lot of times, a lot of successful couples or successful individuals who are pursuing fire, obviously they talk about how great it can be, but sometimes one aspect of it that might not be always talked about quite enough is some of the challenges that might come with it. Are there certain challenges that you would like to share with our viewers?
Yeah, I think one has to be very mindful of, again, going back to the fire does have a lot of tips on how to achieve financial independence. A lot of that has to do with expense reduction and just reducing of unnecessary spending. Um, on a very personal note, like I got to the point where I was a little bit dissatisfied that we couldn't just go out and grab a beer if you were to follow it, fire to extreme levels, right? And I expressed this to Clarice that I feel like, we, if you were to just pursue it to the end of a financial benefit, you could just take away all the things from life that make it interesting, the spice of life, right?
Mhm.
And I think just for us, we had to kind of, we swung one way pretty far on the pendulum, and we had to swing back and say, okay, hey, how much do we want to have for discretionary spending to make sure that we've just not completely robbed our lives of all pleasures, right? So
Yeah.
I think that was important, and it was certainly something that we saw. It can be very, um, yeah, uh, isolating as well. Like if you're, typically we associate going out and spending money with also those opportunities to interact with our friends and family.
Mhm.
So if you're not spending money suddenly, are you just locking yourself in your house, uh, not spending any money at all? That I think that
Right.
are certainly dangerous extremes that
Mhm.
you only a few people, I would say, a select those are willing to make significant sacrifices should even consider living. I think everyone's got to be real with what they are okay with, so that they're happy, right? Because if you're doing all this and you're not happy, I don't know if the means will justify the ends, or the ends will justify the means, I guess.
Good
Mhm.
point. That's a very valid point. You just shouldn't blindly pursue certain things without knowing what is it that is something that you're going to be enjoyable to you. I think one thing I noticed as you're talking about this whole journey as well is that you absolutely enjoy that process. Like you talked about how
Mhm.
as end of the month comes, you're going through that process and have fun going about that. Which brings me to my next question: how do you kind of ensure that you're staying on track towards whatever that end good result and goal what would be for you guys? Is it through those monthly check-ins?
Yeah, I think so, Mustafa. Like with the monthly check-ins, it lets us take a look at where we thought we would be from a financial standpoint, and then by category, we can actually see, hey, did we spend more or less than we expected? And it usually wasn't like, oh, no, we did bad on you if you overspent, but rather, okay, why? Like, what were the reasons for this? Was it something unexpected? Could you make it build that into your plan, that
Mhm.
unexpected thing? um, or are you spending more on this because there's something you really need, and you should be adjusting your expectations around that, or yeah, if in fact was it because you really had no good reason, and you you should tighten that up for next month. I think that's
Mhm.
been good on the monthly level, and then I think we like to zoom out as well, maybe once every a quarter, I would say, and just do a more holistic check-ins. How do we feel? You know, debrief on the events. How are we enjoying it? Like I mentioned,
Mhm.
and then just yeah, checking off any goals we had for that quarter in
Mhm.
terms of experiences or financial.
We also, I mean, beyond looking at just the monthly expenses and where we did well and not so well, we also project out to the end of the year. Are we on track for our year-end savings and income? But also all the way until the year that we anticipate we will be fire.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're constantly looking at that, adjusting those projections to see how and if we have to reevaluate and readjust. So it's not just like looking at it at a monthly level is important, but also looking at the annual projection and the 5-10 year projection is equally
Yeah,
important.
like just understanding how,
Yeah.
with the finish line, how
Yeah.
close are you?
Yeah. Not only our expenses, also our investments. We're looking at our net worth at the bigger picture level.
How it's impacting that? Yeah. Kind of brings me to my next question, Clarice. That's a good segue. At a very high level, is it fair to say, when for someone who's pursuing fire, it's not just about cutting their costs, but also making sure that their assets grow over time? And if you agree with that notion, what are some of your high level reflection and thoughts that perhaps has worked for you when it comes to growing your assets over time, whether it might be investing or other channels? Would love to hear your thoughts, Kevin and Clarice, on that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think even before fire, like just something that we knew is that if you chose not to save money uh, regularly, um, then it would be make it very difficult to have anything for when you wanted to retire. So um, even before fire, we were both fans of trying to save any unspent money, and probably in the old days, you would try to put those in fixed investment vehicles like GICs or mutual funds that were advised by your banker.
Mhm.
But I think as we've evolved in that journey, and some of it to do with Canadian couch potato and tax tips and fire also, is we've shifted that understanding, and we understand the power of the snowball effect, and how you in our experience, you really want to be diversifying your investment in low management fee vehicles such as ETFs,
Mhm.
and you really want to be looking out to see if the institutions which you're putting your money in, are they taking a cut of that, And, hey, it might look like a small number if you look at 1 year, but what if you were to times that by 10 or 20? How much of a percentage are they taking from your nest egg? And so we've really shifted into discount brokerage, investing with low management expense ratio, ETFs, and just really, really following that and investing as much as we can, maxing out both our registered accounts as well as unregistered cash investments.
Okay, if you reflect on your early days of the FIRE journey, what have been some of the most critical steps that you think were helpful to you along that journey?
I think for us, one thing that was invaluable was having people we could sense check all this. So certainly all the YouTube videos can sound very convincing, and the literature can also paint a very rosy picture of the path. But until you speak to real people that, you have some faith that it's not scripted and, they're not trying to get something from you, how are they making it work? And how do your ideas sound to them? And having that community even to get some both emotional and experiential support, I think is invaluable. When we could, we went to like a meetup group for digital nomads. It wasn't directly FIRE, but it was kind of in a related topic. Just to understand more of how people were achieving their lifestyles, to learn a bit more about their stories, and we made some connections which, were useful to us. And because FIRE can be known as isolating, you might have to find a new tribe, like people who you consider your friends, who may be very supportive of you, may not be walking the same path. And it is important, although that's great that they're supportive of you, finding people that are on a similar journey that you can connect with. We found invaluable to have those individuals. And it's funny, once you find one, you can find more individuals.
It
both
goes from there.
Immediately in your physical vicinity, but also in this day and age virtually. I would say it's very accessible for folks, and maybe it's made the world a bit smaller and easier to connect, in fact, with others. Forums. But yeah, we value those personal exchanges on Zoom calls very much like this, talking with people and sharing our personal experiences with them, asking those, silly questions that you think that are silly, but having someone that you could trust to ask that question just to get a sense check.
And I guess maybe for me, and maybe more aligned with the theme of Valentine's Day, I think as a couple pursuing FIRE, in the early days especially, it was so important to have those difficult conversations in the beginning on what are the priorities, or what are the spending categories, and what is the agreed upon budget, and to agree on that to begin with. Because I can imagine, if, for example, he goes off and spends a couple grand on something that, I didn't think we needed it, that would have, caused some strife and conflict in our relationship. But if that conversation is had up front, and to continue having those conversations, I think that's really important as a couple pursuing FIRE. So it doesn't tear you apart, but as a matter of fact, when you are able to resolve those different opinions, it brings you together closer. Yeah.
That's such a great advice, and it's so true too. I think as a couple pursuing financial independence, pursuing your financial journey together, it's so important that you're open to talk to each other transparently and have some of those difficult conversations. One thing I think I've noticed, and at least based on research, I believe one of the key causes of challenges when it comes to a couple's life is the fact that they avoid talking about finances, or finance is always considered to be almost like a taboo, and they don't talk about it. But the sad part is failure to having that open and transparent conversation sometimes can be even the source of bigger problems. So it's so great to see and hear from you how important it is. And also thanks, Kevin, for sharing the importance of connecting with some of the like-minded couples or other folks along the way. I think it's so powerful, and not only I think it allows, to your point, some of that sound check in a sense, or checking, are you on the right track, at least based on what you think, but also getting a sense of how they have experienced this journey to be, and maybe what are some of their lessons along the way.
Absolutely.
Is there any final advice, Kevin and Clarice, that you have for our viewers before we close this show?
I would just say enjoy the process. Do not rely on a single source of information is the other one. Like, vary your sources and get opinions from different viewpoints to help round your perspectives, and buckle up and enjoy the ride. And I think we just wish everyone the best in terms of their journey and their discovery of attainment of whatever they view as the life that they want to live, the good life. So
thank you both. It's great to hear your advice firsthand, and I appreciate you joining us on the show.
Thank you.
Our pleasure, Mo.
Yeah.
Anytime.
Well, thank you so much, guys, for watching this episode of Moementum Mondays. I hope it was valuable to you and you learned something from it. If you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who might benefit from the video as well. And lastly, if you haven't done that already, please subscribe to Moementum channel. Here on Moementum, we post weekly various videos about the stock market investing, stock analysis, financial planning, and finances. Thank you, and I hope to see you next time.